Good morning, students. I want to go over 45, 45, 90 triangle and the 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay, first of all, the proportions for it. The proportions will always be the same. So in a 45, 45, 90, since two angles are equal, I'm going to have these two sides. These are the legs. They will be congruent. So whatever one leg is, that's what the other leg will be. To get to my hypotenuse, I'm going to multiply by the square root of 2. So whatever this side is, we're going to always multiply by the square root of 2. So we're going to go through a number of examples looking at it. So we'll start off with this one. Okay, I know that this leg is 3, so if that leg's 3, then the other leg's going to be 3. Then to get to my hypotenuse, I just take my leg and times it by the square root of 2. So understand, we're always going to multiply by the square root of 2 in a 45, 45, 90. Next triangle, I have 5 square root of 2, so my other leg is going to be 5 square root of 2. And then to get from my leg to my hypotenuse, I multiply by the square root of 2. So times that by the square root of 2. So that's my leg times the square root of 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have 5 times the square root of 4. And then what's the square root of 4? The square root of 4 is 2. So 5 times 2 is 10. So this leg right here is 10. Here, next one. My leg is 7 square root of 2 over 2. So 7 divided by 2, I can divide these. These are both real numbers. Okay, so I could write this as 7 square root of 2 over 2. Or I could say that this, or it's 3.5 square root of 2. Either way, I take it. You can have it. So then I multiply by, so I'm going to go 7 square root of 2 times by the square root of 2. So again, 2 times 2 is 4. So 7 square root of 2 times the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2 with no radical. And then I would go ahead and multiply. So 7, multiply straight across. 7 times 2 is 14. 2 times 1 is 2. So 14 divided by 2 is 7. So I know that there's a lot of work in there, but I just multiplied by the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 to get that. Now, I want to go through another example. I have this leg up here is the square root of 6, so this leg is the square root of 6. Now we're going to multiply square root of 6 times the square root of 2. Again, multiplying by that. So because they're both radicals, they both have roots, I can multiply them. So 2 times 6 is 12. Anytime I have the square root, okay, square root means we need groups of 2. So I'm going to simplify this. Okay, so the square root of 12 is really 3 times 2 times 2. I have a group of 2, so I can write this. Okay, so square root of 12, I have a group, circle a group, comes out, left with a square root of 3. So my answer for this side, up top, is this side up top would be 2 square root of 3. So you always need to simplify. Now we're going to do the opposite. Now we're going to say, hey, before we had the leg, find the hypotenuse. Now here's the hypotenuse. How do I find my leg? So instead of multiplying by the square root of 2, we're going to divide by the square root of 2. So we're going to go 10 divided by the square root of 2. We're going to write all of our numbers in radical form, which means we can't have a square root in the denominator. So we're going to go ahead and multiply by whatever's in the radical. So once again, this would be 10 times the square root of 2 is 10 square root of 2. 2 times 2 is 4, or the square root. And then I can take the square root of 4. So it would be 10 square root of 2 over 2. Then lastly, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this side would be 5 square root of 2. If this side's 5 square root of 2, this side's 5 square root of 2. Go to the next one. Here's my hypotenuse. So how do I get my leg? Is I'm going to divide by the square root of 2. So 12 divided by the square root of 2 is 6. Now, is there any groups in 6? 2 times 3, no groups, so I'm good. So this side, if this leg is the square root of 6, then this leg is the square root of 6. Lastly, we go to 11. Okay, so again, if I know the hypotenuse and I want to work to my leg, I'm going to divide. So 11 divided by the square root of 2. Well, I can't have a square root in the denominator, so I multiply. So that would be 11 square root of 2 over the square root of 4. What's the square root of 4? Square root of 4 is 2, so it would be 11 square root of 2 over 2 with no radical. And then 11 divided by 2, I would just say that that's 5.5 square root of 2. So if that's 5.5 square root of 2, then this one is 5.5 square root of 2. So you could write as 5.5 or 11 over 2, either one. Okay, so understand, in a 45, 45, 90, we are working with the square root of 2. Now if I go to a 30, 60, 90, our rule is I have the short side. Okay, to get to my hypotenuse, I multiply by 2, and this is where there's some confusion. Okay, square root of 2 versus 2 with no square root. So in the 30, 60, 90, my hypotenuse is twice as big as my short side. And then to get to my mid side, I multiply by the square root of 3. So we'll go through a number example. Here, this is my short side because it's opposite the smallest angle. So if this is 30, this is 60. Okay, so here's my short side. To get my hypotenuse, I times this by 2. So 2 times 5 is 10. This side's 10. I take my short side, okay, and multiply. So 5 times the square root of 3. And we leave it just like that, 5 square root of 3. So here's our next one. Here's my short side once again, 30, so 60. They give us 60, so I know that that's 30. The side opposite my smallest angle, that's my short side. So to get to it, I take my short side and times that by 2. So square root of 2 times 2, we write it 2 square root of 2. Can't do anything with it. Okay, from my short side to my mid side, I multiply by the square root of 3. The square root of 3, so 2 times 3, since they're both square roots, I can multiply. It would be square root of 6. Okay, come to this last one. And we're going to multiply. Here's my short side once again, opposite my 30-degree angle. So to get my hypotenuse, I take that side, 3 square root of 3 times 2. So I can multiply 2 and 3 together. They're both real numbers. So 2 times 3 is 6 square root of 3. To get to my mid side, I take my short side, 3 square root of 3, times it by the square root of 3. So 3 times 3 is the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. So this side is 9 units. So that's if I know my short side. It's pretty simple. If I don't know it, I come down here, they give me the mid side. So if I know the mid side, to go before, if I wanted to go from my short side to my mid side, I multiplied by the square root of 3. Now we're going to divide by the square root of 3. So to get to my mid side, I'm always going to go to my short side first with the other two. So I take the square root of 15 and divide it by the square root of 3, and that equals 5. So this side is the square root of 5. So then, to get to my long side, I just take that and times it by 2. So 2 times the square root of 5 would be 2 square root of 5. So anytime I know my mid side, to get to my short side, I'm going to divide. So 2 square root of 6 divided by the square root of 3. So I can divide these. Square root of 6 divided by the square root of 3 would be 2. So now I know my short side. To get to my long side, I multiply by 2. So 2 square root of 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4 square root of 2. Last one, we're going to go ahead. Here's my mid side. So once again, we're going to divide by the square root of 3. Well, if you look at it, I can't divide 12 and 3. They both don't have a radical. So then I got to get the denominator out by multiplying by it. Times it by the square root of 3. So 12 times the square root of 3 is 12 square root of 3. Square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 9. Okay, the square root of 9 now is 3. And then lastly, 12 divided by 3 is 4. So this side would be 4 square root of 3. So now I know my short side. To get my long side, I times it by 2. So 2 times 4 square root of 3, which would be 8 square root of 3. So I have my two sides there. So again, if I know my mid side, I'm going to divide by the square root of 3. Divide by the square root of 3. Divide by the square root of 3, and then divide by the square root of 3. Lastly, let me change the camera angle. is we're going to go ahead and say, if I know my hypotenuse now. So if I know the hypotenuse, I'm going to get rid of this right here so I'm not confused with this word. So if I know the hypotenuse, the longest side, how do I get to the mid side? Instead of multiplying by 2, I'm going to divide by 2. So 6 square root of 3, divide by 2, and that would equal 3 square root of 3. And then I go from my short side to my mid side by multiplying by the square root of 3. So square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. And 3 times 3 is 9. So this side is 9. Okay? This side is 3 square root of 3. Come here. My hypotenuse is 12. And I just divide that by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. To go from my short side to my hypotenuse, I multiply by the square root of 3. Lastly, if I come to this one, I know my hypotenuse is 6 or 5. I divide that by 2. I'm just going to write it as 2.5. And then I times that by the square root of 3. Can't do anything with that, and so we leave it like that. So again, remind you, the 30, 60, 90 triangle, the proportions are get your short side, so to get your hypotenuse, we multiply by 2. To get to your mid side, we multiply by the square root of 3. In the 45, 45, 90, we have two sides that are equal, and we multiply by the square root of 2. So write those down each time we go through it. Write them down so you remember.